all, Alex here with the Wisconsin Computer Club, and tonight I want to talk a little bit about a machine that's going to be making its way to EVERCON. EVERCON, which is coming up here on March 1st. Get your tickets, shameless plug. Tonight we want to talk a little bit about Atari, and a rather unusual Atari machine at that. This is the Atari XEGS. And for those who aren't familiar, Atari had two divisions. They had the video games division, which was responsible for the likes of the Atari 2600, the 5200, the 7800, and ultimately the Jaguar and Lynx and whatnot. But they also had a computer division, and in a way, two computer divisions, but we won't get into the whole fiasco there. So for the longest time, they made computers as well. Starting in 1979, Atari made computers as well. This is the Atari 400. This is the first computer they sold, but it is cartridge-based. It uses cartridges for most of its games and software. It did have tape backups and it did have floppy drives later on, but for the most part, it used these cool little metal cartridges with the dust shields on them. This one's a Warner Brothers Star Raiders. It's a, doesn't have a date on that one. Probably 79 or an 80. Anyway, this was a huge success. Granted, as time went on, as the 8-bit computer wars continued, the Apple II, of course, did very well. The Commodore 64 and the whole Commodore range did pretty well. The Atari computers existed and continued to do well, but not to kind of, I think, the degree that Atari wanted them to go. And as computer technology continued to advance, Atari's machines were more and more relegated to more game machines. And so by the time after the video game crash had hit, Jack Tramiel was now in charge of Atari, and he very much saw Atari's future in computers as being making PC clones, which they did, and the Atari ST, which was his vision for what the computer standard could be for business. And the ST was very much fighting with the Amiga, which was itself losing in battle to the IBM PC platform, which we all know today. The 8-bit computer range wasn't dead, though. They were continuing to make the new XE platform. The XE was basically, it had a little bit better for a processor. I think it was a little bit faster, 6502C, and it had a little bit more RAM, and I think it had a different kind of data bus structure. I should probably check my notes on that. But the XE65 and the 130 were kind of the end of the road for the 8-bit computer range, and Atari was very much seeing this as, okay, these things are going to be put out there. There's a very niche market for these in the home sector, and that's about it. We're going to kind of run out of steam for these. At the same time, in 1986, with the release of 7800, it does not do nearly as well as they're hoping, even though it is a much more powerful system, because there's this little gray box called the Nintendo Entertainment System in the way, and it has completely dominated the video game market. So someone at Atari sits down with their distributors and says, hey, we want to get back what we believe is rightfully our market share. And they say, well, why don't you guys make another video game system? And they say, well, what can we make a video game system out of? Oh, we could take the Atari 65 XE, reconfigure it, and much like a Taco Bell menu item, which is made of the same stuff that the other things are made of, boom, you get the Atari XEGS. I'm going to try and lift it up here. Hopefully it doesn't knock the power offline. So what you have here, you have your power button, you have your start, select, option, and reset. So this would, on some games, you'd have an option key. So they work pretty much like you'd expect. It's going to fire up Pac-Man here. On the side here, you have a port for the keyboard, which is an optional feature. Some of these came with them, some of them didn't. This one has, of course, two joystick ports. They're kind of in these weird kind of angular cutouts on the side. I'm not sure how well that comes across. And then on the back, it has a multi-port, which would be where you plug in your other accessories, peripherals, so if you had a modem or a tape drive or a floppy drive or anything like that. This is completely compatible with all the other Atari computer stuff because under the hood, architecturally, it's the same system as an Atari 400 or 800 from 1979. It does have slightly better output options. It has a really clean RF output, which is what we're using right here, and then it has a composite and a mono audio for your video options. So all in all, not a bad little thing here. So it looks like a video game system, and it plays like a video game system, and it runs Atari cartridges. And of course, if you are so inclined, as some people were, you can turn the thing off and pull out your separate keyboard with a little short cord here, so if you wanted to move it around your desk a little bit, you could. And that's going to plug in. Let's see if I can get it in one try. Come on, come on, come on, come on. This is not, there we go. So with this one, you can take the little locking tabs here and slide it right into there like so to make one big system. And assuming you didn't knock the power cable loose, it'll power right up here and it'll go into BASIC. So now you're in a computer operating environment. It runs Microsoft BASIC. I think it's 4.0. I'm not 100% on the actual version. Atari licensed this one for all their various systems. Pretty much everybody ran some flavor of MS BASIC at this point, if not some bespoke thing like what Commodore had. It has a really long spacebar for a keyboard. Otherwise, it's pretty unremarkable for an 80s, PC. It kind of is what it is. As 8-bit computers go, this one's not too bad, but kind of far from ideal. And at this point in the game, everybody's looking towards 16-bit systems and that kind of thing going forward. One last interesting tidbit about this system is that it did not come with a pack-in game. Most game systems at this point were coming with a cartridge to get you started, if nothing else. This one didn't. Instead, Atari went the cost-saving route of just taking a ROM of the game they already had and plugging it into the motherboard. In this case, Missile Command. So, if you don't have a cartridge plugged in, or if your cartridge is plugged in a little bit crooked, or in our case, if it's dirty or doesn't quite want to sit right, it's going to boot into Missile Command instead, which is handy if you really like to play Missile Command all the time. And of course, as this was one of the 8-bit computers, it's completely compatible with things like the trackball or some of the other third-party accessories that were used just to play this game. So, or any other kind of game you might want to play, light gun games included. So this was a pretty cool system for that. As a legacy product, it's interesting. I really like this system. Not many people have seen it. They sold about 150,000 units, give or take, depending on what source you're looking at. They came on the market in '87, and by '89, they were completely discontinued and out of production. And of course, in the early '90s, Atari canceled production on all this stuff, for good, because they were essentially bankrupt at that point, and had moved on to, the whole Jaguar project. And I guess in a way, I feel it's an important piece of Atari's history. This is the end. This is the last system that Atari, as we kind of understand it through the '80s, put out there to try and retake the market that they believed was theirs. This was their last-ditch effort to try and take back the market. They didn't have the money or the time or the resources anymore to develop something that could leapfrog the NES, not especially with the new systems coming out there. They would have to wait for the Jaguar system to try and do that and not do that. But this was their last chance to kind of try and wedge their way back into the video game market. And even with the glut of software that they had available for this system, and even with a handful of developers who were willing to give them a shot, it was too little, too late. And so it's been forgotten. So when we take it out to shows, it's an oddity that I don't think a lot of people have ever seen before. It's something that certainly pretty much no one we encounter has ever played with. And it's a lot of fun for us to be able to give people that experience. So if you are going to be attending EVERCON on March 1st, stop on by and give this thing a try. It is essentially under the hood just an Atari computer system, but in a way it's more than that. It is the last Atari system from the classical Atari era before things really fell apart. And I think in that way it makes it, kind of special. So thank you so much for indulging my ramblings. I hope you all have a wonderful evening and enjoy the stream, and I'll hopefully see you at the next one.